Here at Sean of the South, we're keeping our hands sharp with the help of Case Knives, the sponsor of this episode. A tradition of my family for generations, my granddaddy used to say the best cure for idle hands was to build something. But in today's day and age, everything's done with a click, a swipe, or a tap. But how about we put away the screens and put your hands to work with a Case Knife?
Hey, you are listening to Sean of the South, and I'm your host tonight, Sean Dietrich. And man, we got a great show ahead of you lined up here tonight, coming to you live in the podcast airwaves and the radio waves all over this fine nation. Got a wonderful, wonderful group of people behind me here fixing to play music for you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Hank and Patty and the Current, everybody. Hank and Patty and the Current.
You'd be there when I broke through the vines. But now you're running around this town without a single care. When the time is right, you'll look for me, and I won't be there. Take your notes and take your cards and put them all away. Take this letter that I write and read it one lonely day. If you decide you've done wrong by getting rid of me, keep on waiting in your tears, 'cause you know where I'll be. Put my cares in the ground. I'm leaving on the next train. Don't you know I heard the sound? Could be true. This heart of mine may be for sale, but baby, not to you. I'm leaving on the next train. Put my cares in the ground. I'm leaving on the next train. Don't you know I heard the sound?
A little bit of our mail tonight, a little bit of our mail sent in to us from listeners all over this country who had nothing better to do than to put a few sentiments down onto paper for us to hear tonight, or people who were very interested in airing their neighbor's dirty laundry before a theater of innocent bystanders. This first message comes to us from Cody in Nashville, Tennessee. Sean, I was born and raised in East Tennessee. Last month, I married Elizabeth. By far the best thing that has ever happened to this big, clumsy, grinning idiot. My sweet, soft-spoken wife hails from North Alabama, and she is as southern as Shinola. We're in our early 30s and enjoying the salad days. But there's been one point of contention where your expertise is desperately needed. So, as an East Tennessean, Sean, I am unapologetically fond of the patriot frontiersman Davy Crockett, and I proudly don my coonskin cap at every event and opportunity I can. Now, my missus winces at my cap these days. She doesn't share the same affinity or reverence for the apparel or the man who made it famous. She doesn't dislike the man, but she sees the cap as childish and likens it to a young boy dressing up as Superman or wearing an eye patch to become a pirate. We like your podcast show, and we have made it a blissful ritual listening to each new episode each weekend when we're together. We can't wait to see you live at an event when you're near Nashville. We're both curious, what is your take on Davy Crockett coonskin cap? Whether either are held in high regard, is it time to retire my cap, or as a vestige of my childhood, do I need to continue supporting it loud and proud? Wishing you health and happiness, all good things, your friend Cody. Well, dear Cody, when I was 5 years old, we lived in Spring Hill, Tennessee for a short period, and I was a boy, and one of the first things that we did when we crossed the state line, my father and I, was stop at a tourist trap store. And I just want to show y'all what my father bought, because I have a replica here that I just bought at a tourist store. Right here. And I don't have any problem wearing it in public as a man. I think I look right good. If I had a mirror, I think I'd probably want to sop myself up with a biscuit. But Cody, to be fair, I've always enjoyed dressing up. As a child, I had a pair of Superman pajamas, a pair of clothes I would wear underneath my normal clothes, and I would sit in school and I would wait until we had a bathroom break. I would go into the bathroom, I would lock myself into one of the stalls, and I would take off my normal clothes, and I would emerge as Superman and show up in school just as casual as you please. I believe in dressing up, and I believe here in this coonskin cap. I think I'll just keep it on. Bill Dobbs, Paragould, Arkansas. Hey, Sean, we love to ride ATVs at my house. And my son last week was riding, and he fell off his horse, so to speak, and he broke his ankle. It's nothing serious, but he's laid up for a while. If you could wish him a speedy recovery, I know that he will know I'm thinking about him. While I'm on my way to work, I just thought I'd message you that. His mom is pampering him. All the best. By the way, his name is Ben. Dear Ben, we wish you a speedy recovery, and may you not be too afraid to get back on that gasoline-powered horse. Charlotte Brownard, Missoula, Montana. I like your show. My dad is traveling to Alabama this week to attend a family reunion with strangers. See, my mom was from Upper Alabama, but I never knew her because she died when I was 3. My dad has been married, though, for almost 38 years. And when we got the call about this reunion, he and my mom, my new mom, Jan, jumped at the chance to honor the memory of my mother. I do wish I could go because I'd love to see and meet the people that my mother comes from, but I guess I'll just have to be satisfied with pictures from my dad's phone and stories from his mouth. Anyway, it's one of my mom's cousins who introduced us to your show. I haven't listened to more than one, so I don't know if they're any good. But on the off chance my dad and Jan will listen to this in the car on the way to Alabama, tell my dad, whose name is Jerry, he's an amazing father and an amazing person for honoring the memory of my real mother like he's doing. Well, dear Dad, Jerry, I hope you just got all that. If you didn't, just pull over on the side of the road and hit rewind. Susan McCollins, Parkville, Missouri. Long-time listener, first-time commenter. My dog ran away last night. He was gone for 4 hours, then came back this morning, covered in ticks and fleas and some weird smell. And even though he stunk, it was a pleasure cleaning him off, because for those 4 hours, I had imagined the worst while he was gone. Isn't it funny how when you lose something, it changes everything about you? All of a sudden, you don't mind a little dirt and stink and ticks and fleas, just as long as you have your love in your arms. Anyway, that's all I had to say. I had to write it down because it was sort of profound to me. Then once it was written, I just had to send it to somebody. And so you were my first victim. All the best, Susan. P.S. Come to Missouri sometime. I'll take you antique shopping. Reginald Taylor, Decatur, Georgia. I used to listen to radio when I was a kid, but somehow things have changed considerably over the years, and now there ain't a thing to listen to. My grandson introduced me to podcasts, and sadly, for me, it wasn't a whole lot different. It didn't seem like there were many podcasts in my vein of interest. Everything was about heinous murders. Or it mentioned a bunch of shows that were meant for toddlers with sing-alongs. So I just wanted to say thanks for your podcast, because it fills a small void in my life that I didn't know was there. Dear Reginald, you got it, sir. Elena Rodriguez, Mexico City, Mexico. I am in Mexico to be with my family, who I haven't seen in a long, long, long while. My brothers and me were born in Texas, and we lived in Louisiana and Alabama all my life. My mother and my father were from, originally, La Ciudad, Mexico. And over the years, they would tell us how badly they missed their brothers and sisters and mama and papa. But they could not bring themselves to go back, because it's so dangerous, you see, in La Ciudad. But this year, my grandpa, who I've only talked to once on the phone, had a small stroke. And my dad decided we were going back to visit his family, by God, and my mom's family. I'm a 34-year-old woman, and when I crossed into this land, I felt something come alive in my heart. I am Mexican, and I kept saying that to myself. This is my soil, and these are my people. And it gave me chills. It was almost too much to handle. And so I started crying. So much so, I started crying. Everything about my life began to make sense, who I was. And I started grieving for my mom and dad, who left it all so that we could live a life safe from violence that runs rampant in La Ciudad. So my family went back to Texas after the trip was over. But I'm still here with my grandparents, my abuelo and my abuelita. And I'm discovering what I am and who I come from. Todo lo mejor, your friend, Elena. Dear Elena, may the sun rise on you this morning, and may you look at it with all affection and realize that it's the same sun you view, no matter from which direction. May you build a bridge to the land of melodic mariachis and pueblas with dusty streets, with delicious tamales poderosos and all the other things that you may eat. And when you're ready to come back, may you bring it all with you when you cross that line. Bring the colors and the smells and your entire heritage, which shall last until the end of time. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have something else to do. I'm going to remove, once and for all, this coonskin cap so I can finish doing this show here for you. And that's letters from our listeners. We're going to have another tune here from Hank and Patty in the Current, everybody. Hank and Patty in the Current. Good Lord, I wish you'd give this band another hand. Everybody, Hank and Patty and the Current, ladies and gentlemen. Hank and Patty and the Current. Well, we had a cold front sweep through northwest Florida. A cold front came down from the north, and it kind of hovered over our world like a spirit. Like a specter. It just kind of wove through those longleaf pine forests and the beach and the southern pines and the Florida maples and the live oaks and the magnolias until it got to the Choctawhatchee Bay, the big patch of smooth water, the Choctawhatchee Bay of my youth. And it just made the whole world cold. It made it cold and unbearable. My mother called me just yesterday morning. She said, Sean, it's cold here. You stay gone. Stay out of town. Don't come back. You don't want to come back here. This is the judgment. Kind of cold. It makes you believe in some of the things you read in Revelation or the Old Testament. My mother said that it was so cold she was watching the television, and the man on the Weather Channel or the Dothan, Alabama news station, he was standing in front of the digital map saying that this is going to be the coldest winter we've ever experienced. He had a parka on, a big old fluffy parka. She said that when she got up to get tea to warm her body, that her bones were creaking. This was the kind of weather that makes people look forward to a good fever. Yes, it's cold weather, cold weather. I asked my mother, I said, how cold did it get? She said, Sean, last night it got down to 64 degrees. 64 degrees. But we can't help it. This is who we are. The northern part of our county, Walton County, right around Lake Jackson, it gets so cold during this weather. The mailmen are walking around and they're looking out for dogs and polar bears. And my mother can lay in her bed with her blanket drawn up to her chin, and you can hear her teeth chattering, even though her teeth are in the glass on her nightstand. It's cold, cold. Prisoners up in the Defuniak prison are looking forward to the electric chair. Cold weather that makes us question the very foundations of our beliefs. My mother used to take us into the corner when it'd get this cold, below 65 degrees, and she would put on 4 or 5 space heaters around us, and she would cover us in quilts, old quilts that descended from my granny, made from old patches of old clothes, and she would open up her leather-bound Bible and begin reading from the very last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation, to keep us sober, She'd say, this is the judgment. Armageddon is upon us. This is what it's speaking about right here in this chapter right here. See, it says the moon will turn to blood, the sea will turn to pus, and out of the sea will come this creature with 3 or 4 heads and 52 horns and 87 eyeballs. And underneath his left arm, he shall be carrying the board game Dungeons and Dragons. And underneath his right arm, he will be carrying an Elvis album. And he will step onto dry land, and he will do the most evil thing any creature has ever done in the universe. He will get himself a console television, he will turn it on and watch Three's Company. Evil is only associated with cold weather in our world. You see, I don't know how they do it in Kentucky, but in northwest Florida, when the temperature drops below 65 degrees, we are looking for the second coming. I was raised as an evangelical, and my mother taught me to always look up because you never knew when the good Lord was going to come back. And so I lived in a kind of fear. Very, very keen observations to the weather I would make. I would notice whenever it changed a little bit, and I was always waiting and listening for that trumpet sound, but I never did hear it. All I heard was the sound of my mother on the porch screaming my name to come in when it dropped below 65 degrees. We can't handle it. We just don't know how to do it. I was driving along a few days ago before I got here, upward to North Alabama, through Tennessee. I had left a gig that I had done where the people, how do I put this, did not like me. You see, I I don't know how I got into the speaking business. I wasn't really ever supposed to be doing this. And I can tell, looking out at many of you, that you understand this. You can tell. I can see that man in the corner nodding his head up and down. Yes, you should not be up on that stage. I want my money back. The first time I was asked to speak, one of the first times I was asked to speak was the Houston County Public Library. The lady called me and she said, hey, we have a few people who read your column. Would you like to come speak to us? We can get you a few people and put a bun coffee machine in the corner and have some donuts. And you can just, talk to them, tell them a few stories. I said, sure, why not? I'd never done this before. And so I was foolish and had no idea what I would do. The closer the date got, the closer I thought about it, the closer it came out, the more I thought about it, and I thought, I better have something to say here. And so I rehearsed stories to tell. Now, when I got there, I was early, and there was nobody there. And I sat there in that room waiting, and the coffee maker was making this humming sound next to me. And donuts were calling my name, and so I ate 5 of them. And an old man walked in the door first, an old man wearing a cowboy hat with a long beard. He had boots on, jeans, and plaid. He sat down in this very front row of folding chairs they had for me. And I stood up and I looked at him. I said, sir, are you lost? He said, no, I'm here to hear that joker speak. I said, oh, yeah. He said, what are you here for? And I looked at this man, much older than I was, much more burnished with experience. I said, I'm here to hear that joker speak too. And I went and I sat down next to him. He crossed his legs, and he reached into his back pocket, and he removed a little sack of something, a little paper sack with a picture of an Indian on it. Red man chewing tobacco. He reached his 3 fingers into that bag, and he put a little wad in his lower lip, and he got one of them styrofoam coffee cups that they had by the coffee maker, and he just ever so slightly would let a little trickle of brown spit fall out of his mouth. And we talked. And he told me things about himself and growing up. And I listened to his stories. And I loved his stories. You see, an old man has an edge over me. I don't have that many stories like an old man. A man with experience can step backward and he can look at his own life from the third person. I can try, but I will never be that man. And I looked at him talking his stories to me like that, and people were showing up one by one in that little library, and I was transfixed with this man. He was just talking easy and free, like an old man will. And I found myself hypnotized in the sound of his rural accent. And people were still filtering in through the doors, and I looked and waited. And at the end of their arrival, the room was full from front to back. It was standing room only. I had no idea what I was going to do. You see, I'd prepared to read a few of my columns and to just talk a little bit about, things that were pertaining to those columns, but people were standing there in this room, and they had smiles on their faces, and there were men, and there were women, and there were some children, and there was that old man on the front row with that bushy white beard and that lump the size of a SEC regulation football on his lower lip. And I thought, nobody gives a rip about what I have to say. Why am I even going to try? So I just started talking and telling stories. We were there for about an hour. And I told my stories. And when I finished, the room kind of filtered out, probably never to return. And that old man was still there. And he came up to me, and he removed his cowboy hat. He placed it on my head. He said, "Not bad at all, son." And it made me feel so good. I knew he was lying. I knew I had done a terrible, terrible job. I knew that I had no business being on the stage telling stories, but this man's words, those few words, they did wonders inside me. I went home And I started imagining to myself that I had opportunities ahead of me. You see, I never had a whole lot of opportunities. As a child, I had kind of a chubby childhood. My mother used to buy me Husky brand jeans in the Sears store. If you want to kill a child's confidence, put him in a pair of Husky jeans. Them jeans was in the back of the store on the rack that was just right to the right of the dressing rooms, to the left of the electric chair. And when my mother would get me in these jeans and she had to use a certified U-Haul winch to drop me in, she would force the button closed, she would lift up the bottom of my shirt, and she would kiss my white belly and make a raspberry and go, "Brrr, that's Mama's little man." Confidence was not something I had in spades. And then when I got to be 14, I got my first job hanging drywall. And then I got a job on a landscaping crew. I got a job painting houses with a friend of mine, both inside and out. And this is why I will never, ever touch a paintbrush again. I threw sod, I planted wax myrtles. I crawled on tin roof and helped hang commercial roofing for a little while. Hung gutter with a friend of mine. I worked as a stud framer in a framing crew. I did many things. And when people asked me what I did out in public, I was kind of embarrassed, you know. I never had a whole lot of excitement over it. I didn't even go to high school, so I couldn't even boast of my education because I had no education. And I had no formal job training. I just sort of did what I was doing. And I can remember once this girl who I really wanted to impress asked me what I did. "What do you do?" she said. And I said, "About what?" And that became my pat phrase because I didn't know what I was or what I did. And in fact, standing here on the stage right now, I don't know what I am or what I'm doing. But those words that people say to you, they get inside you. They work their way past your rib cage and into your stomach, and they swirl around up there, and they swim upward through your chest and neck and finally up into your head, and they make you believe things about yourself that you probably wouldn't have believed otherwise. And these words that old man said to me meant a lot to me. And I started speaking and doing what I'm doing now. And I have been doing it now for 3 years. And I still have no earthly idea what I'm doing. I was running along, driving upward through North Alabama, through Tennessee, trying to get here on time. And I stopped, I pulled over in this little tiny antique store that was off the side of the road. Big old warehouse building, big sign out front said antiques. And I looked around, I was looking around for belt buckles. I love belt buckles. My wife has forbidden me expressly from buying any more belt buckles of old things and relics gone by. Nobody wears belt buckles anymore, she says, but by God, I do. I wear a belt buckle with every outfit. I love them. I love them. I bought a few belt buckles, checked out. The lady looked at me. She said, "You ain't from around here, are you?" I said, "No, ma'am, I'm not." I said, "How do you know?" She said, "Well, for one thing, your license plate says Florida." Next door to the antique store building was this little cafe. Didn't even have a proper sign. It was just one of them signs on wheels with the arrow pointing to the place and the bulbs that light up, and there were black text letters on it, and it said, "Best Burger." That was it, Best Burger. Walked inside, the little bell dinged on the door. Everybody's eyes looked at me. It was like a cowboy walking into the Last Chance Saloon. They just let their eyes fall on you, and they wonder who's going to draw first. And I looked at them, and I kind of sheepishly raised my hand in a 2-finger wave so as not to draw attention to myself. My waitress led me to a booth. I sat down, opened the menu. The menu had written right in the center 2 words: hamburger, fries. She looked at me, she said, "What'll it be?" I said, let me think here. She said, "I'll take the hamburger, that looks good. And I guess I'll have some fries with it." She said, good choice. That's our specialty today, happens to be." While I was sitting there, I looked into the corner and I saw this group of old men. One old man had this cowboy hat on. and a white bushy beard, wearing plaid shirts and jeans that were a little bit too tight for their old bodies. Kind of, if when they stand up, someone had forgotten to tell them that they should have gotten a bigger pair of jeans, maybe even a husky pair of jeans, because when they stand up and the light hits them just right, you see more of that old man than you wanted to see. These old men were hunched over the table, and they had suspenders on, and one of them wore a Bass Pro Shop cap, and they had old world accents like your granddaddy probably had, and they were talking about things. One of the old men said something like, hey, what was that man's name he used to date? Sharon? You remember Sharon Duval? He used to date her, man. I can't remember his name, but he had hair that was 5 foot tall with too much hairspray on it, a big set of ears, and his face always looked like he just sucked a lemon. And the men, they all kind of laughed, and they said, I can't remember who that was. He left town a long time ago. And then someone else would say, hey, did you know that Marilyn's son just built his house across from her house, so his kitchen window would face her kitchen window, just for the reason so that in the mornings when they woke up, he could get his coffee and look out that window and wave at his mama while she was getting her coffee. And one of the other men, he would say, hey, can you believe that Mike Ayer is running for mayor again? Can you believe it? I'm telling you the truth right here this day, as sure as I am a Southern Baptist man, that skinny dipping stunt he pulled in high school will come back to bite him in the tail. Old men. They are retired from their profession, and now they use their words, and they use them when they gather around these cafe tables with old men who are their peers in these cups of coffee that are bottomless cups of coffee, eating their eggs and their too much saturated fat that their doctors have warned them against. They use their words and tell these stories that just weave through time. There is no train of thought to these stories. They just simply follow a path until it's over, and then another man from another side of the table will just spot off something else that is completely unrelated to the original comment, and it opens up the conversation. And now we're talking about hunting deer and hunting duck, and ladies who used to live in town who had scandalous morals, and old preachers who used to go fishing and they would carry a flask in their hip pocket when they thought nobody was looking. It doesn't matter. And it finally dawns on you when you watch them, they're not talking to each other. They're simply reporting news. They're simply telling stories. And while I was in there watching them, I almost forgot completely about my hamburger and French fries, and I saw this young couple walk in. Young man wearing a pair of old jeans that were covered in grout and some kind of paint, and old work boots and a work jacket that was covered in dust, maybe sheetrock dust. And he had a young wife with him who was holding on to his arm, and in his other hand he carried a baby carrier, a little infant inside that baby carrier. And he came to the booth behind mine. Waitress came up to him. She said, "How you doing, John? How's your mama?" John, this young man, he hung his head. He said, "Oh, she has good days and bad days." She said, "Well, you tell your mama that I'm going to come see her. I'm going to come see about her this week." He said, "Yes, ma'am, I certainly will." She said, "What do you have to eat?" He said, "Oh, I don't know. What's the special today?" Before that waitress brought his hamburger and fries to that young man and wife, I noticed that his wife was tired. She looked so tired. Bags beneath her eyes that were so big they needed Samsonite labels on them. She looked like she needed a long carnival cruise with a fruity drink in her hand that had an umbrella poking out the top. And she was holding this baby, and this baby commenced to throwing a ever-loving conniption fit. I mean, flailing the arms around a bona fide tantrum, throwing its body in every direction, writhing like a fish and screaming loud enough to vibrate the ceiling vents. And this young woman stood up and she started rocking her baby. She started bobbing up and down and spinning. She tried all the tricks that mothers try. And out from the back of the kitchen came the waitress. And the waitress said, "Oh, bless her, bless his heart, bless his heart." She took the baby from her, and the baby stopped immediately. And that waitress took that baby on a tour of the restaurant, introducing him to every single table, even my table. And when she got to my table, I gave that little boy a high five. His name was Bradley. A good, strong name, if you ask me. I mean, you wouldn't fool with a man named Bradley. And then she took that baby over to that group of old men, and their conversation came to a screeching halt. They looked at that baby, and their eyes lit up, and you could see the transformation taking place in them. They were no longer old men, they were granddaddies. One man stood up, the man in suspenders, and he took that baby in his arms, Bradley, and he rocked him back and forth, and he kissed his forehead. And then another man came and stole the baby away from that man. He was a tall, skinny man wearing a Bass Pro Shop cap. He took that baby and he started whispering to him in a sing-songy voice and explaining the rules, the finer points of SEC football. And the men, they had all risen to their feet, and they were all talking to this baby. They were talking to him, and I knew what they were doing. They were telling the child stories. And it looked as if these men had just found Bradley lying in a manger. They were so enamored and enchanted with this child. Beautiful sight. And when it was done, when this couple was done beside me eating, the waitress came out to check on them, and she picked up the plate, and she noticed that the young woman was leaning against that man. She was sleeping, and she was just letting out this little faint snore with her mouth. And the waitress said, "Oh, bless her heart, bless her heart." The young man said, "Yeah, I think this is the first bit of sleep she's had all week. You know, Bradley keeps her busy." She said, "Oh, I bet. Oh, bless her soul." And then the young man said, "Look, I hate to be rude, but I got to get back to work. Can I have my bill, please?" The waitress looked at him, grinned, and winked and said, "Your money's no good here. Your money's no good here." And then she walked back toward the kitchen, and the young man said, "Are you serious? Well, thank you. Thank you." She looked back at him. She said, "Don't thank me. Thank that group of old men who's fixing to kidnap your baby." And then she was gone. And the old men were still gathered around that child. Their old voices. And they were using words. The same words that once made a red-headed boy who had no idea what he was or what he wanted to do with his life. The same words from an old man's soul that brought me here to you. Our words mean a whole lot more than we think they do. Maybe it's not such a bad thing to have nothing but words to use. Hey, thank you very much for having me this evening. It's been a wonderful pleasure. Thank you very much, Dietrich. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for listening to Sean of the South. I've been your host today, Sean Dietrich. And man, it's been a bona fide pleasure. If I do say so myself, this episode was brought to you by Case Knives, a tradition of my family dating back to my granddaddy, who once said the best way to cure idle hands was to build something. So keep your hands sharp with a case knife. And Folklore Brewing Company, quite literally the best brew in Alabama. 2 gold medals at the craft beer competition of Alabama. Do yourself a favor and check out folklorebrewingandmeadery.com. That music you heard behind me today was Hank and Patty and the Current, 2 of North Carolina's veteran bluegrass musicians who have joined forces with some of the Triangle area's most versatile musicians to create modern American music that is acoustic and full of a range of their talents as composers and arrangers. The band is on tour regionally and nationally in support of their new album, Hold Your Head Up High, on Robust Records. You owe it to yourself to visit Hank and Patty, PATTIE.com, and there you can download their new album. To find anything more about what I do, you can visit SeanoftheSouthShow.com, and there you can find archived episodes of everything that we've ever done, dating back to the very first one when we had absolutely no idea what we were doing, to this episode you just heard, where we have very little idea of what we're doing. And while you're there, I hope you take the time to drop me a line. Tell me about your birthday announcements, wedding invitations, ice cream socials, and potlucks, and I'll do my best to read them over the air, because I love to do that sort of stuff for my friends. And speaking of friends, be wary of soap dispensers in public restrooms. You never know what they're filled with. You think they're filled with soap, but what if, just what if, they were filled with ketchup or mustard? That would teach us all a lesson in trust. Adios.